Greetings, my dear friends. Today, we delve into one of humanity's most enigmatic tales, where the line between myth and reality blurs. What if the fate of empires, the rise and fall of great powers, hinged on a single spear thrust, delivered on one of history's darkest nights? On that fateful night on Golgotha, as the heavens roared with a furious storm and black clouds gathered over the hill, nature itself seemed to mourn what had transpired. The hill, recently bustling with human clamor, was now strewn with the ominous echoes of the day's spectacle. 3 crosses rose against the bruised horizon, their weathered wooden beams soaked through with blood and rain, and the air hung heavy with the scent of iron and damp earth. The crowd's whispers, once furious, had given way to an anxious, reverent silence, as if the earth held its breath, awaiting the final act of this tragedy. Among the soldiers tasked with guarding the crucifixion site stood Centurion Longinus. His heavy armor was wet with rain, and his hand instinctively gripped the shaft of his spear, accustomed to pain and death. He had witnessed countless deaths on battlefields and in Roman amphitheaters, but something about the figure on the central cross caused him deep disquiet. This man did not curse his tormentors, nor did he beg for mercy. Instead, his words were soft, and his gaze piercing in its otherworldly calm. Now, as thunder crashed and lightning tore through the sky, the world seemed to pause, sensing something inevitable. Longinus was given the order to complete the task. He stepped forward, his boots sinking heavily into the sodden earth, and with a swift, practiced motion, plunged the spearhead into the side of the crucified man. At that very moment, blood and water poured from the wound, gleaming ominously in the dim stormlight, and a chill swept through the gathered crowd. Some gasped, others fell to their knees, and still others fled in a panic, convinced they had witnessed not merely a soldier's blow, but something far more profound and mystical. This spear, ordinary in appearance, would never again be just a weapon. From that moment, legends began to entwine around it, like ivy clinging to ancient stone. It was said to have absorbed the last essence of Christ, holding within it a spark of both unbearable suffering and divine majesty. Those who touched it claimed to feel its invisible allure and inexplicable weight, as if history itself bowed to it, acknowledging its sacred significance. The storm intensified, tearing cloaks and banners to shreds, and in Jerusalem, as tradition held, the veil of the temple was torn in two at that very instant, interpreted as a sign of broken boundaries between the earthly and the heavenly. In the minds of those who witnessed these events, the spear became not only an instrument of ultimate death, but also a relic of cosmic importance, a symbol of a pivotal moment in human history. Even then, that night, the whispers spread that whoever possessed this spear could not be defeated, that kingdoms could rise and fall depending on its owner. When the body was removed from the cross, the spear remained with the legionaries. For them, it was merely war booty, a curiosity to be taken back into the heart of the empire, a symbol of their power and triumph. But among the secret followers of the man they called Christ, the memory of that thrust carried a completely different weight. They spoke of it in hushed tones, as if uttering it aloud could summon both miracle and curse, held within its metallic heart. Before we continue our captivating journey through the ages, don't forget to watch this video to the end. Truly astonishing conclusions await you in the finale, which will overturn your perception of power and destiny, And all links to our new, equally fascinating materials can be found in the description below this video. Many years would pass before the spear's story took clear shape in manuscripts and scrolls, passed down through generations, acquiring new details and interpretations. Early chroniclers debated its true meaning. Was it merely a cruel accident? Or did the hand of fate guide Longinus to pierce the Savior's side to fulfill some grand plan? In time, even the soldier himself, Centurion Longinus, became an integral part of this grand legend. Some claimed that he, blind, regained his sight upon touching Christ's blood, finding healing not only physical but also spiritual. Others whispered that he became a convert, deeply remorseful and a saint, guarding the memory of the spear until his death. What is certain is this: the relic did not vanish into obscurity, nor did it dissolve into the dust of history like so many other artifacts. Instead, it passed from hand to hand, carrying with it the shadow of fate, altering the course of history and influencing the lives of entire peoples. In the treasuries of Rome, at the courts of powerful emperors, in the whispers of monks' prayers, and in secret societies, the spear began to take on a life beyond mere metal. It became the spear of destiny, believed to choose rulers, overthrow tyrants, and shape the very course of history, becoming a symbol of absolute power. If you find this story as captivating as we do, please support our channel. Subscribe, it's incredibly important for such in-depth research to continue. And be sure to let us know in the comments where you're watching this video from. We are very interested to know the geography of our community. But on that raging night in 33 AD, none of this had yet been written. There remained only the soldier, the spear, and the anxious silence of the hill, awaiting a dawn that would bring new, even more astonishing events. Lightning split the sky one last time, illuminating the weapon in Longinus's hand. For a moment, it glowed as if iron ignited by celestial fire, before plunging back into darkness. And it was in this darkness, on the eve of dawn, that the legend began to breathe, acquiring its primal force. The storm slowly subsided, its fury replaced by a soft, cleansing rain. The crowd dispersed, their footsteps muffled by the wet earth, and the execution hill remained in an anxious silence, save for the steady drip of drops on stone. Above, the clouds parted just enough to reveal a sliver of moonlight, silvering the spear's shaft, resting in the soldier's hand. No one yet knew the true weight of what he carried, the colossal power this spear had acquired. And so, in the silence after the thunder, a relic was born, not just of iron and wood, but of history, symbol, and unyielding faith. A relic destined to pass through centuries, shrouded in mystery and intrigue, feared by some, passionately sought by others. A relic destined never to rest, forever moving through the labyrinths of human history. The rain softened further, as if the earth itself sighed after its grief. Shadows stretched longer, and voices hushed, leaving only the whisper of the wind, which carried the memory of the blow descending the slopes of Golgotha, like a secret carried in a dream. Beneath the streets of Rome, in intricate corridors where sunlight dared not penetrate, the first believers gathered. Oil lamps flickered on roughly carved walls, their meager glow casting whimsical halos dancing over faded frescoes depicting loaves, fish, and shepherds. The air was damp, carrying the scent of stone and mold, mixed with a faint waxy smoke from candles. It was here, in the ringing silence of the catacombs, that whispers of the spear began to pass from mouth to mouth, like a fragile flame nurtured in utter darkness. Christians, huddled in these hidden chambers, lived under constant threat of persecution from the Roman Empire. To pray openly meant risking chains, arenas, and inevitable death. Yet the story of the crucified Christ had spread too deeply to be silenced, and with it, the story of the spear that pierced his side. They spoke of it not with triumph, but with deep reverence, as if its memory was a relic of both sorrow and the great promise given to humanity. Some of those who pondered the profound meaning of what had transpired claimed that the spear was cursed, for it had served as the instrument for the final, decisive wound. Others, expressing their thoughts more reservedly and profoundly, insisted that the object was, on the contrary, consecrated, for it was steeped in the blood and water that flowed from the Savior's side. In these secret, dimly lit gatherings, where voices were hushed, an ordinary weapon was transformed, becoming something more than just a piece of metal. It became a powerful symbol, an insoluble paradox, and a deep mystery. Among the tales that invisibly circulated in these underground shelters, the story of Longinus himself held particular power. It was said that the warrior was struck blind during the storm on Golgotha, a punishment for his cruelty. However, when Christ's blood touched his eyes, his sight miraculously returned. Whispers circulated that after this, he repented of his actions, left the legion, and spent the rest of his days in obscurity, bringing to the world a new faith that had been born at the moment of his own spear's thrust. Whether this story was absolute truth or merely a legend, it undoubtedly brought comfort to those who lived in fear of Rome's power. For even the hand that pierced the divine body could be forgiven. The relic itself, as tradition held, moved unobtrusively over the subsequent decades. Some claimed it remained in Jerusalem, carefully hidden by the first followers of the new faith. Others believed it was transported to Antioch and concealed in a reliquary beneath the altar of a modest, inconspicuous church. And still others whispered that it had long been in the very heart of Rome, hidden in the private collections of senators who, despite the official ban, were fascinated by collecting Christian artifacts. Thus, the catacombs became a kind of echo chamber for all sorts of speculation. Each new gathering brought with it fresh versions, some of which sounded hopeful, while others were ominous. One day, a silver-haired woman spoke of her visions, claiming that the spear would one day be raised by kings, and its owner would be invincible in battle. A lean man countered her, insisting that such power was extremely dangerous, and perhaps it would be much better if the spear were lost forever, buried where no human hand could ever obtain it. And all the while, the flickering lamps cast strange shadows on their faces, as if carving them from darkness and flame, and the catacomb walls seemed to listen to every word. Beyond the whispers of faith, the spear subtly but surely wove itself into the intricate web of politics. Roman officials, curious about this new sect that, despite all persecutions, refused to disappear, began to take notice of the circulating stories. Some scoffed at such tales, others felt fear, but a few still wondered if this weapon truly possessed such incredible influence. Could it be used for the benefit of the empire? Thus, the legend spread in two opposing directions. Among the persecuted believers, it served as a symbol of hope, and among the powerful of the world, as a seed of ambition. Centuries later, chroniclers would fiercely debate where this relic actually resided during those tumultuous, fragile times. The truth is shrouded in a dense veil of silence, for its very first custodians left no written records, only an oral tradition. But what is certain is that the memory of the spear survived, carried like a smoldering ember through generations of believers who prayed in the shadows. In the catacombs, this whisper was both comforting and unsettling. It offered solace to tormented souls, yearning for visions of divine justice. But it also warned of the heavy burden carried by such a powerful relic. Perhaps it was never meant for mortal hands. Perhaps its story was merely a parable, not an object of possession. However, the human heart is rarely content with parables alone. Somewhere in the silence, someone will always ask, "Where is it now?" This question echoed through every hidden chamber, penetrating even dreams, and so the legend grew, remaining invisible but unforgettable, like the flicker of a candle burning in the darkness, until even the silence itself seemed to breathe with anticipation. As the lamps burned lower, shadows lengthened, gradually freezing into stillness. The believers quietly dispersed to their homes, leaving into the night, leaving behind only the faint scent of wax and the barely audible echo of whispered prayers. In the ensuing silence, the whisper of the spear lingered, imprinted on the stone, like secrets too deep to be erased. Dawn illuminated Constantinople, making its domes and marble walls gleam, catching the first rays of the sun. The empire was undergoing a period of change, its center of gravity steadily shifting eastward. And with this, a thirst for symbols awakened, for objects capable of connecting heaven with the throne, for relics that could crown earthly power with divine legitimacy. It was in this New World Order, during the reign of Constantine the Great, that the story of the spear began to weave itself into the very fabric of imperial destiny. Constantine was a man prone to visions. It was said that on the eve of a decisive battle, he saw a sign in the sky, a shining cross, accompanied by words promising victory under this symbol. Inspired by this omen, he ordered his soldiers to go into battle under banners adorned with the chrism, the emblem of Christ. Against all expectations, he achieved a brilliant victory at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. For his enemies, it was merely a stroke of luck. For his followers, undeniable divine proof. For Constantine himself, it became a calling. In the following years, as he consolidated his power and reformed the empire, Constantine sought to collect Christian relics, seeing in this not only acts of piety, but also powerful instruments of authority. Among other rumors, whispers reached him of a certain weapon, already imbued with the seal of destiny, the spear that had pierced the side of the crucified Christ. If such a relic could fall into the hands of the emperor, what doubts could remain about heaven's favor on his reign? Chroniclers later claimed that fragments of this spear indeed came into Constantine's possession. Some said it was given to him by bishops, who eagerly wished to link their faith with the power of the crown. Others suggested that it had traveled a long way from Jerusalem to Antioch, and then to the very heart of the empire, kept in the strictest secrecy until it appeared at his court. Whatever the truth, this idea became deeply rooted in people's minds. The emperor possessed not only the power of Rome, but also the very relic of destiny. In the majestic halls of Constantinople, the spear had long ceased to be an ordinary Roman legionary's tool. It was transformed into a sacred artifact, exquisitely adorned with gold and precious stones, finding its resting place in lavish reliquaries where the air was thick with the enveloping scent of frankincense. This object was displayed not as a symbol of cruelty or violence, but as undeniable proof of divine favor and approval. It was believed that a mere touch of it meant contact with that invisible thread connecting heaven and earth. However, as is often the case, any great power inevitably casts its shadow. Whispers circulated throughout the city that this relic could not only bestow blessings, but also inflict curses with equal force. It was said that emperors who dared to claim it found in their reigns a remarkable intertwining of both great triumphs and profound tragedies. Even Constantine the Great himself, despite his numerous victories and being canonized by some, suffered from severe ailments towards the end of his days. Thus, superstitions became closely intertwined with historical facts. The question remained, was his suffering the exorbitant price for possessing the relic, a burden too great for mortal hands? Nevertheless, the mystical aura surrounding the spear only intensified with time. In subsequent centuries, Byzantine emperors carefully guarded it as an indispensable part of their sacred arsenal. It was solemnly displayed on feast days and during grand processions, serving as a silent yet powerful reminder that the empire's might rested not only on the marble of palaces or the steel of weapons, but also on sacred relics, connecting them to the gospel narrative of Christ. The spear became part of the unspoken language of power, a relic invoked during coronations and military campaigns, its presence perceived as both a blessing and a heavy burden. The common people also kept its story in their hearts, passing it down by word of mouth. Pilgrims who managed even a glimpse of it spoke of the reverence that stayed with them for years. They returned to their villages with astonishing tales of a relic that, they claimed, glowed like fire under the flickering light of a candle. Its aura was heavy as a mountain, and its silence seemed louder than thunder. For these people, the spear was not just an imperial treasure. It served as tangible proof that heavenly history still touched the earth, continuing to influence the mortal world. And so, the spear of destiny became firmly embedded in the fabric of the empire, woven into mosaics of saints, sung about in solemn hymns beneath the vaulted domes of majestic temples, and meticulously guarded in chambers adorned with marble and gold. It ceased to be Longinus's weapon that pierced the Savior's side. Now it was the emperor's relic, a jewel in Byzantium's crown, a coveted prize that would attract kings and conquerors for many centuries to come. However, relics are restless entities. They cannot be locked away forever. Power clings to them, like a shadow pursuing a flame, drawing the gaze of those who crave dominion and absolute authority. The spear, born in a storm of passion and spilled blood, was only beginning its long and winding journey. Grand crusades, unbreakable oaths, and bitter betrayals awaited it. Knights in white cloaks, sworn to keep a great secret, were destined to take this relic into their care. The city came alive as morning bells began to toll solemnly throughout Constantinople. The streets quickly filled with bustling merchants and pious pilgrims, stern soldiers and humble priests. But deep within the palace, in a chamber filled with incense, the relic rested, waiting, silent, patient, watching, for true relics never sleep. They simply exist, awaiting the next hand to take them, the next chapter to be written in their name. The ringing of the bells gradually faded, dissolving into a distant echo, and the golden light of the approaching morning spread over the city, bringing with it a sense of tranquility. In this serenity, the relic faintly gleamed beneath its covering, as if it held not only a deep history, but also the beat of a coming prophecy. The road to Jerusalem was an endless ribbon of dust and blood, stretching through impassable mountains, boundless plains, and waterless deserts, carrying people driven by deep faith, ambitious aspirations, and a yearning for absolution. It was 1096, and the world heard of the proclamation of the First Great Crusade. From countless villages and towns across Europe, thousands set out under the banner of the cross. Their standards fluttered in the wind, and their armor jingled in time with their weary, monotonous steps. Some walked barefoot, sincerely convinced that every wound on their body was a kind of prayer offered to heaven. Others, armored knights, rode with the pride inherent in noble houses, their swords sharp, their eyes burning with visions of paradise promised to those who would liberate the holy city. However, among the whispers of pilgrims and soldiers, their journey was accompanied by another story, quieter, but far more powerful than any sermon. It was said that whoever went into battle carrying the spear of destiny could not be defeated, that the iron tip, once piercing Christ's side, carried not only sorrow, but also an unwavering guarantee of victory. For people trudging towards inevitable death, such a story was truly irresistible. The Crusaders carried relics of various kinds, splinters of wood, supposedly from the true cross, bones of saints hidden in exquisite reliquaries, vials of dust called holy earth. But nothing ignited their imagination as much as the legendary spear. If Emperor Constantine once possessed its fragments, if Byzantium itself zealously guarded it in its palaces, could it not reappear to guide them to triumph? And so, on long nights by campfires, while jackals howled mournfully beyond the desert dunes, the story of the spear was recounted again and again. Some swore that the spear still rested in Constantinople, zealously guarded by emperors. Others claimed it was hidden in Jerusalem itself, waiting to be unearthed by true believers. Some whispered of Antioch, where ancient churches crumbled to dust, and every stone seemed to conceal secrets of long-forgotten relics. The crusade was marked by unbearable hunger, devastating diseases, and sudden ambushes. The roads were strewn with the bodies of the fallen, whose pilgrimage was interrupted either by exhaustion or the enemy's sword. Yet through all their trials, the vision of the spear seemed to tirelessly follow them. It became not so much a material object as a powerful promise: endure long enough, and the heavenly relic would appear to crown their suffering with deep meaning. Letters sent home by knights often contained descriptions of battles where the course of events seemed to inexplicably shift at the last moment. These victories were so unexpected that they could not be attributed solely to strategic thought or military skill. In the depths of their consciousness, though unseen, the image of the spear was constantly present. Clergymen accompanying the troops on their campaigns diligently fueled this belief, preaching that divine grace and mercy invariably favored those who followed under banners adorned with relics, whether visible or hidden, or each triumph served as a powerful incentive to strengthen their convictions. At the same time, any defeat was interpreted as a consequence of sin, which only further urged the warriors to an even more zealous search for sacred artifacts. As the Crusaders, exhausted and hungry, approached Antioch, the legend of the spear flared up with new intensity. Tales claimed that Antioch was a city literally imbued with the spirit of relics, a place where apostles had once walked and prayed. And if the spear existed at all, it was undoubtedly to be sought there. The promise of discovering this artifact infused the weary people with new energy, enough to proudly raise their banners once more. However, a sinister shadow lurked within this hope, for the spear was never considered a mere relic. It represented a force, untamed and extremely dangerous. And where immense power concentrates, suspicion and betrayal inevitably arise. Among the leaders of the Crusade, a hidden rivalry began to brew. Whoever managed to acquire the spear, if it were found, could claim not only divine protection and patronage, but also supreme leadership itself. Thus, this relic, not yet found and unseen, was already sowing seeds of discord. Even before its actual discovery, it guided hearts, inflamed ambitions, and deepened the already existing cracks between people who had sworn to march under one cross. The march to Jerusalem was more than just a movement of armies. It was an epic journey of myth. Step by step, mile by mile, the blood shed on this long path was, in their imagination, sanctified by the unseen presence of sacred relics. Among all these artifacts, nothing held such significance as the spear, an iron point promising victory to its wielder, even though it carried the memory of death on the hill. As the Crusaders wrapped themselves tighter in their cloaks, seeking refuge from the biting cold of the desert night, the flames of their campfires slowly died down to embers. Their marching songs faded into quiet prayers, and their eyes closed from unbearable exhaustion. But even in sleep, many of them dreamed of this weapon, shining in the candlelight, held high above armies, its long shadow falling on battlefields where no defeat could touch them. The night air grew cooler, the sands stilled. A gentle wind swept over the tents and banners, carrying the whisper of destiny eastward, to yet unconquered cities, to yet unfound relics. It was 1119, and Jerusalem had been taken. The holy city, long an unattainable dream, was now in the hands of the Crusaders. However, the roads leading to it remained extremely dangerous, strewn with bandits, thieves, and hidden threats from rival empires. Pilgrims arrived in continuous streams, barefoot and trembling, driven by an insatiable desire to see the places where Christ once walked. Too often they failed to reach their goal. Deserts and mountain passes claimed their lives, not only through thirst, but also by the merciless sword. It was in conditions of this constant danger that 9 knights appeared before the King of Jerusalem with a special oath. They swore not to seek wealth or personal glory, but to dedicate themselves entirely to protecting pilgrims and preserving sacred relics. They wore simple cloaks. Their swords served not for conquest, but for guarding, and they bound themselves by a vow that would echo through the centuries. These were the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, soon to be known simply as the Knights Templar. By day they patrolled the roads, their shields marked with a red cross, escorting believers from the city to the holy sites. By night, they lived within the Temple Mount itself. Their dwellings, it was claimed, were built upon ancient foundations. These foundations gave rise to whispers of secrets hidden deep beneath the stones. For the Temple Mount was not just a fortress. It was a place where Solomon's temple once stood, where rumors of untold treasures and priceless relics lay buried in dust and silence. The Templars' oath was severe, binding them to poverty, chastity, and obedience. But there was another oath, spoken less openly, kept more in silence than in words. It was an oath to guard what the world was not yet ready to see, for relics possessed colossal power, and power was always dangerous. In the dim light of their chapels, illuminated only by the flicker of oil lamps, the knights bowed their heads over reliquaries, vowing that what fell into their hands would not be squandered or displayed as trophies of pride, but would be hidden, preserved, and carefully guarded. It was in these early years that the legend of the spear became closely intertwined with the Templar order. Some claimed that fragments of the holy weapon had already been entrusted to their keeping. Others insisted that the Templars tirelessly sought it, searching secret vaults, excavating beneath ruins, piecing together fragments of information brought east by rumors and ancient scrolls. Whatever the truth, the Templars, in the imagination of the Christian world, became associated with relics that were too dangerous for kings and too sacred for ordinary eyes. The Church initially regarded them with clear suspicion. Knights who prayed like monks, monks who fought like knights. However, their reputation soon grew significantly. Their strict discipline and mysterious secrecy inspired both awe and unease. Pilgrims spoke of them as angels with swords. Rulers, however, saw them as men who answered only to God, not to an earthly king. And in every hall where whispers were heard, the same question always followed: what did they guard beneath the temple? Rumors circulated that it was gold, immeasurable in quantity. Others claimed it was ancient scrolls from the time of King Solomon himself, holding secrets long lost to the world. But only a few, exchanging hushed remarks, dared to ask, did the spear itself not rest in their hands, hidden from view until the appointed hour, guarded by oaths whose strength surpassed iron? The Templars themselves never confirmed or denied anything. Their consistent silence only deepened the veil of mystery. And perhaps therein lay their true wisdom. For such a relic as the spear possessed the power to enthrone or depose kings, to inspire entire armies to heroic deeds, or condemn nations to utter ruin. It was far better that it remained hidden under stone, shrouded in silence, protected by oaths that bound men more tightly than any chains. In the night hours, when desert winds howled around the massive walls of the temple complex, the knights gathered in their chapel. Their cloaks were neatly folded, their swords set aside. They knelt in rows on the cold stone floor. Their prayers rose in a rhythm older than battle itself, turning into whispers that penetrated through the vaulted arches and massive columns. And always in the air was a sense of guardianship, a deep understanding that they were not merely soldiers of Christ, but vigilant guardians of something immeasurably ancient, something the world should not hold in its careless hands. The candles burned down, the night diamond, and shadows stretched across the stone like long, tenacious fingers. And in this deep silence resided their oath. It was not written on parchment, not carved in marble, but carried with every breath and pulsed in their blood. It was an oath of guardianship, an oath of secrecy, an oath of the spear. The march to Antioch turned into an exhausting journey through famine. By the winter of 1097, the Crusaders were emaciated, their eyes sunken, their boots worn to tatters, and their bellies tormented by excruciating hunger. Yet they pressed on, driven by the alluring vision of Jerusalem and the whisper that relics of immeasurable power lay hidden in the ancient city. Antioch, once the seat of apostles, rose like a pearl on the Orontes River. Its massive walls inspired fear, and its towers bristled with countless defenders. To take it seemed an impossible task. To retreat, however, meant plunging into complete despair. The siege dragged on for months. People gnawed on leather belts, trying to stifle the unbearable pangs of hunger. Horses, once proud steeds, were slaughtered for meat. Diseases ruthlessly thinned their ranks, and rumors of desertion spread through the camp like a plague. Yet amidst all this suffering, hope clung to a single thread: the possibility that heaven itself would intervene, that the sacred relics of Christendom would be revealed to strengthen the faithful. It was in these desperate days that a monk named Peter Bartholomew came to the forefront. He was a man of slender build with fervent eyes, claiming to have received a divine vision. In a dream, St. Andrew appeared to him, revealing that the holy lance, the very spear that pierced Christ's side, lay buried beneath the floor of the Church of St. Peter in Antioch. His words spread through the exhausted camp like wildfire through dry straw. Was it madness born of hunger, or the long-awaited divine answer for which they had prayed so fervently? Skepticism battled fiercely with faith. Some leaders openly scoffed, accusing Peter of fabrication. Others, too weary to doubt, clung to this faint possibility. Finally, a small group entered the church, beginning to break open the stone floor with pickaxes and bare hands. Long hours passed, sweat mixed with dust, until at last a triumphant cry rang out. A spearhead, darkened by time, was extracted from the earth. This discovery literally electrified the entire camp. Priests declared it a miracle, undeniable proof that heaven had chosen this crusade. Soldiers openly wept, convinced that the tide of war had turned. The relic was carried through the ranks in a solemn procession. Torches blazed, songs rose into the night sky. People who just hours earlier had been in utter despair now knelt in the mud, convinced they had touched the very edge of destiny. And indeed, victory soon followed. Strengthened by new resolve, the Crusaders stormed the city, taking Antioch against all odds. For them, it was undeniable proof. The spear had granted them triumph, just as the prophecy foretold. From that moment, its presence invisibly influenced every campaign, every battle. Yet even in triumph, a slight doubt lingered. Some whispered that Peter's vision was a deception, that the spear found was merely an old weapon, planted in a moment of despair. The leaders of the crusade were divided. Was it truly a sacred relic, or merely a symbol skillfully devised to bolster faltering faith? But symbols possess immense power, often surpassing truth itself. For the people who carried it, faith alone was enough. The relic was guarded with deep reverence, wrapped in cloth, carried into battle as a banner of hope, and wherever it went, morale soared like a bright flame. However, a deeper question remained unanswered. Was this the true spear, or one of many fragments scattered through time? The world would never know for sure, and perhaps this uncertainty was its greatest strength. An invisible relic can be doubted. A relic held in trembling hands cannot be ignored. For the Templars, who rose in the subsequent decades, the story of Antioch was closely woven into their own fabric of secrecy. Whispers also circulated that they sought the true spear, perhaps beyond Antioch, perhaps in places the crusade never reached. Whether they ever touched it, no one can say. But Antioch proved one thing: undeniably, relics can move entire armies, turn despair into victory, and changed the destinies of whole nations. After the city finally fell under the Crusaders' heavy and uneasy rule, the legendary spear found its place within the walls of its churches. It rested there in the flickering light of countless candles, becoming an object of deep veneration for an unending stream of pilgrims. And yet, even in the deep silence of the night, when the day's prayers ceased, unspoken questions lingered in the air. Was this truly the iron tip that pierced Christ's side? Or was it merely an ordinary metal object whose miraculous power stemmed solely from fervent, sometimes desperate, human faith? In Antioch's chapels, the lamps barely glowed, their flames trembling uncertainly with every gust of the biting winter wind. Strange shadows stretched ominously across the cold stone floor, the very place where the spear had once been discovered, as if the earth itself retained the memory of the trembling hands that had once drawn it from its depths. Outside, beyond the city walls, the Orontes River flowed dark and silent, carrying its secrets into unknown distances, as if knowing that the true journey of this sacred relic was only just gaining momentum. Following the dust of Antioch and the fading echoes of triumphant cries, the story of the sacred relic plunged into an even deeper veil of mystery. Not every sacred treasure was destined to be the subject of lavish processions or open public veneration. Some were meant to disappear into the deep shadow of oblivion, where only a narrow circle of initiates could bear the burden of their safekeeping. For the Knights Templar, whose fame and reputation resounded throughout the Christian world, the spear became something more than just a tradition passed by word of mouth. It transformed into a sacred mandate, whispered within the dim stone walls of their abbeys. Their commanderies stood like silent islands amidst a turbulent world, spread across Europe and the Holy Land. These were impregnable strongholds, built of pale limestone, whose walls were austerely unyielding, and whose chapels struck with their strict asceticism. They contained within their depths not only arsenals of swords and shields, beneath the monasteries, where walls echoed with ceaseless prayers, and beneath chapels illuminated only by the flicker of solitary candles, secret vaults were carved deep into the earth. There rested precious reliquaries of gold, silver, and sometimes even simple, unhewn wood. For even the most modest-looking casket could conceal within it the most sacred of all treasures. In one such commandery, rumor had it, lay a hidden reliquary, carefully wrapped in thin silk and placed on an altar that no ordinary pilgrim's foot ever approached. The chapel above looked quite modest. Its walls remained undecorated, and the crucifix was devoid of any luxury. However, the few who were allowed to descend the narrow hidden staircase spoke of an object shimmering in the subterranean gloom, a shard of iron blackened by centuries, but skillfully set in shining gold and clear crystal. Some swore it was a genuine fragment of the spear itself. Others insisted it was merely one of countless copies that had appeared and spread throughout the centuries. But for the Templars, the question of authenticity was far less important than the sacred oath of guardianship. Their order was burdened with the duty not to display such relics to public view, but to guard them, protecting them from the greedy ambitions and corrupting influence of the outside world. For kings, relics served as powerful symbols of their dominion and legitimacy. For the Church, they were undeniable signs of its spiritual and temporal power. But for the Templars, these sacred objects were an unbearable burden, a heavy weight of responsibility, inextricably linked with deep mystery and the necessity of self-sacrifice. They believed that the less the outside world knew of its existence, the more securely the relic itself was preserved. That is why the hidden chapel was never openly mentioned. Its existence was denied with persistence, even when vague rumors seeped through the cracks of history, like a poisonous fog. Only historians and chroniclers, conducting their research centuries later, would still discover faint traces, a marginal note in an ancient manuscript, a hidden drawing beneath a palimpsest, a fleeting, almost imperceptible line in some monk's diary. And so, in the crypt beneath the Red Cross, perhaps lay the iron of Golgotha, too uncertain to be proven, yet too ominous to be entirely ignored. Let us imagine the scene unfolding inside this secret chapel. The air there is cool and dense, saturated with the aromas of old limestone and warm beeswax. A single lamp burns steadily before the reliquary, its flame gently swaying with the faint breath of invisible draughts. Two knights kneel before it, their heads bowed in deep humility, their heavy swords resting on the stone floor, witnesses to their silent reverence. Neither speaks a word. Words are superfluous here. The relic needs no loud proclamations or lavish ceremonies. It demands only a humble presence. The silence itself, condensed in this place, transforms into the deepest prayer. Perhaps the spear itself never literally existed there. Perhaps what lay in that reliquary was merely a tangible fragment of faith itself, a powerful symbol of what people so passionately yearned to believe. However, symbols can be sharper than sharpened iron. They can pierce the human soul far deeper than any physical weapon. And in the secret chapel of the Templars, this unwavering power of faith was guarded with far greater ferocity and zeal than the most powerful royal crown. The world outside this sanctuary buzzed with insatiable trade and all-consuming ambitions. Pilgrims flocked en masse to bustling port cities. Kings wove intrigues and conspiracies in their royal courts, and Roman pontiffs issued their authoritative decrees. But in this secret place, the flow of time seemed to stand still. The relic waited, untouched by the hustle and strife of earthly kingdoms, as patient and motionless as ancient stone. The Templars understood something profound that many others had long forgotten. Relics are not just part of history. They belong to eternity itself. Their sacred guardianship was not only about preserving the spear for one particular era, but about safeguarding it for all future centuries of humanity. And so, this secret chapel became not merely a repository for stone or metal, but an unshakable repository of deep, eternal silence, a silence that continued long after the people who guarded it had turned to dust. The lamp still flickers. The silence around it thickens, becoming almost palpable. And in this unbreakable stillness, the sacred relic continues its waiting. Be it true iron or a figment of human imagination, be it undeniable truth or ancient myth, it patiently waits. For relics, like the most profound secrets, never truly disappear. They slumber in hidden chapels, in long-forgotten vaults, in the innermost corners of human memory, where only faint whispers of them remain. Far to the west, beyond the boundless expanse of the Mediterranean Sea, the heart of the Christian world pulsed relentlessly to the rhythm of ancient rituals and unquestionable authority. The Vatican, an unshakable fortress of faith and colossal political power, kept an unblinking watch over the world, viewing it with a complex mixture of deep devotion and pervasive weariness. In the dim, shaded halls of the Apostolic Palace, Papal scribes and influential advisors exchanged quiet whispers, their quills silently scraped across expensive parchment, as if the very ink carried a hidden fear. For some stories proved too dangerous to be directly committed to writing, and among them, the tale of the spear loomed menacingly, surpassing most others in significance. The centuries-long journey of the legend of the sacred relic traversed through an era, passed down by word of mouth through the disjointed accounts of travelers, through the correspondence of valiant crusader knights, and the meticulously kept chronicles of monastic orders. By then, the church hierarchy had fully realized that these artifacts were not merely symbols of deep spiritual significance. On the contrary, they represented powerful levers of influence and pillars of power. Monarchs passionately coveted them, and popes skillfully wielded their force, and somewhere, beyond the direct reach of ecclesiastical authority, existed the spear, dark, with ancient iron fittings, imbued, it was rumored, with destiny itself, resting in the hands of those who had sworn to guard its profound secret. Growing apprehension arose from a series of acute questions that troubled the minds of church figures. To whom did this powerful relic truly belong? Would it not become an instrument to directly challenge the Church's authority? And was it not already invisibly influencing world rulers, subtly shifting the balance of power in wars, coronations, and acts of treachery? Sages and theologians hotly debated whether the holy object had ever truly left Jerusalem, while wise advisors strongly recommended extreme caution, emphasizing that even the mere knowledge of its existence could become a formidable weapon. To allow it to be mentioned aloud would be to unwittingly invoke both irresistible covetousness and inevitable danger. In majestic chambers adorned with gleaming gold and inspiring frescoes depicting the faces of saints and martyrs, diligent scribes painstakingly copied ancient manuscripts, often resorting to complex ciphers or barely perceptible hidden marks. The margins of the manuscripts contained vague hints about the Knights Templar possessing some extraordinary treasure or knowledge. However, the references themselves were skillfully veiled in complex symbols, understandable only to deeply initiated adepts. In parallel, enigmatic maps were created, covered with secret markings and invisible inscriptions, intended either to truly guide the way or to skillfully mislead any subsequent seeker. Even the supreme pontiffs, seated on the throne of St. Peter, were not immune to the deep fear engendered by this mystery. Some openly declared that the very existence of this spear posed a direct threat to the fragile stability of the entire Christian world. For if the Knights Templar or any other mortal hand were to openly possess it, what monarch or emperor would dare to defy or disregard obedience to Rome? One high-ranking cardinal, slowly pacing the polished marble floors of the papal chambers, quietly but emphatically remarked that such relics were as dangerous as any army, for their power was hidden, yet absolute and undeniable. Another, full of wisdom, warned that the Church must invariably maintain plausible deniability regarding this artifact, for to openly declare its knowledge would be to inevitably make itself a target for greedy and powerful forces. However, despite all fears, an irresistible temptation also existed in the minds of papal advisors. If the Holy See could officially claim possession of the spear, or at least fragments of it, it would become an undisputed, supreme symbol of divine grace and favor. In the imagination of the pontiffs, grand processions were envisioned, where the relic would be solemnly presented to the people, blessing armies, decisively influencing monarchs, and unshakably asserting the Church's supremacy over all earthly powers. But the potential risk of fully revealing this secret was too great to take. Therefore, the Vatican made the strategic decision to choose the path of deep secrecy. It was recognized that it was far wiser to feign complete ignorance than to bring unpredictable disaster upon itself and the entire Christian world. Tension in papal circles visibly increased as more alarming rumors reached Rome about the rapidly growing influence of the Knights Templar. These knights, though they had taken vows of obedience to the Church, acted with striking independence in distant lands, bringing with them not only untold treasures, but also many unsettling rumors. Persistent whispers circulated that the legendary spear was precisely in their possession, securely hidden in deep crypts beneath austere, ascetic chapels, and its ancient iron tip reflected the dim candlelight in a way that was inaccessible to any outsider. For the Vatican, this presented a paradoxical phenomenon, both a miracle and a threat, a relic capable of both inspiring the Christian world to great achievements and completely destabilizing it. In response to these threats, Vatican scribes diligently toiled in the deep silence of their scriptoriums, carefully cataloging ancient manuscripts, meticulously encrypting sacred knowledge, and tirelessly ensuring that the true history of the spear never became public knowledge. Mentions of the relic were skillfully buried in complex allegories, passed down through generations with unwavering certainty that only those initiated into the secret language and symbolism of the Church would ever be able to interpret their true meaning. And yet, even with such sophisticated precautions, a deep anxiety continued to be felt in the corridors of power, for complete security seemed unattainable. Relics, as is known, have a strange habit of unexpectedly appearing to the world precisely when their presence is least expected. Beyond the impregnable walls of the palace, the eternal city of Rome continued its majestic and at the same time mundane life. Bells tolled steadily from high bell towers, markets bustled with ceaseless activity, and pious pilgrims humbly knelt in magnificent basilicas beneath shimmering golden mosaics. However, in the hidden chambers, concealed from the eyes of commoners, the Church literally held its breath, awaiting the unknown. For its hierarchs understood perfectly well that the spear's story transcended the bounds of simple legend. It was a living, tangible force, capable of shaping the destinies of kings, guiding entire armies, and rewriting the very fabric of history. And as long as this artifact remained in secret hands, the anxieties of the ecclesiastical authorities would never fully subside. Candle flames flickered and died down, casting strange, long shadows on the walls adorned with the austere faces of saints and martyrs. Scribes bent over their parchments, realized with trepidation that every stroke of ink, every symbol, was an integral thread in the finest, complex web of hidden knowledge. Outside, the city fell into a deep sleep, but within the Vatican, fear quietly pulsed in the innermost corners, like the measured heartbeat of a mystery too powerful and dangerous to ever be revealed. Far from the majestic splendor of Rome and the roar of countless battlefields, in the secluded, quiet corners of the vast Christian world rose austere monasteries, whose graceful arches and powerful columns served not merely as dwellings, but as true sanctuaries for prayer, deep contemplation, and the careful preservation of ancient secrets. Here monks, clad in their humble robes, rustling across polished stone floors, walked with measured steps, their gazes humbly lowered, whether in deep reverence or perhaps with the subtle calculation necessary to preserve knowledge that possessed the power to overthrow monarchs and change the course of history. These monasteries served not only as humble abodes of faith, but also as invaluable repositories of collective memory, where the history of the sacred spear was carefully passed down through many generations. In the dim, flickering light of candles, monk scribes copied ancient manuscripts with extraordinary meticulousness. Ink, like a liquid shadow, flowed smoothly across the parchment, tracing letters that often concealed far more profound meaning than they revealed. The margins of these manuscripts were covered with cryptic symbols, maps cleverly disguised as ornamental flourishes, and phrases written in ancient languages known only to the most initiated. An uninitiated, curious eye might skim these texts and see only pious writings or ecclesiastical doctrines. But those who were thoroughly trained to decipher the secret patterns and symbols of the Church could easily discern not only a detailed map of movements, but also a complex code indicating the location of relics, securely hidden beyond casual curiosity and the gaze of profanes. In these abbeys, immersed in deep silence, the faintest whisper first circulated, immortalizing the secret connection between the Knights Templar and the legendary spear. It was here, within the monastery walls, that diligent monks carefully recorded information about journeys to the east, where, according to ancient traditions, individual fragments of this holy weapon traversed boundless deserts and majestic mountain ranges. They found temporary refuge in secluded hideaways and other monastic abodes located along the famous Silk Road. Every entry made was the result of a conscious choice, and every omission was a deliberate decision. For knowledge, undoubtedly, was a tremendous power, yet that same power, in the wrong or unworthy hands, could turn into unpredictable destruction. Some manuscripts that have survived to this day contained mentions of such significant cities as Antioch, Constantinople, and Jerusalem, but these references were always couched in deeply allegorical form. Phrases like the staff of the blessed or the iron of the martyr could simultaneously refer to a single genuine relic or to numerous copies skillfully crafted with the sole purpose of misleading and diverting casual or undesirable seekers from the true path. On the margins of these ancient texts, as if in a mysterious dance, various symbols were placed. Here a star might be depicted, there a cross enclosed in a circle. The uninitiated observer perceived them merely as ordinary decorative embellishments, whereas the truly informed person unfailingly recognized in them hidden clues and valuable instructions. Thus, the narrative of the spear's fate spread in deep silence, remaining completely invisible to all outside the carefully guarded inner circle of initiates. Furthermore, the monks exchanged whispers about mysterious visions. One might dream of a distant mountain pass, where a glimmer of ancient iron faintly flickered through the mists. Another would awaken with a deep conviction of the existence of a certain map, carefully hidden beneath the old floorboards of the monastery. Each such interpretation was carefully discussed in hushed voices, and none was ever openly recorded, so that precious knowledge would under no circumstances escape due to accidental carelessness or inattention. It seemed as if even the monastery walls themselves possessed the ability to hold ancient memories. The stone, like a living organism, absorbed all secrets, and thus the abbeys themselves became as reliable keepers of sacred knowledge as any devoted knight or impregnable vault. Nevertheless, the Church could not fully trust even its own monks. The rise of the Knights Templar occurred with astonishing rapidity. Their influence spread discreetly, but with relentless determination throughout the Christian world. Whenever a new commandery was established, monasteries often followed, and with them, manuscripts skillfully coded with clues to the possible whereabouts of the legendary spear. The Roman Curia observed cautiously, well aware that secrecy alone was not enough to ensure complete control. Silence, of course, had to be strictly maintained, but at the same time, extreme vigilance had to be constantly preserved. In the twilight corridors of these abbeys, the line between deepest devotion and unshakable duty practically blurred. The monks offered their prayers both for the salvation of Christ's soul and for the careful preservation of priceless knowledge. Every step they took, every trembling flicker of a candle flame, was perceived as an integral part of a complex ritual aimed at safeguarding the mystery. The narrative of the spear possessed too immense a power to allow it to drift aimlessly without proper oversight, and was too significant to rely solely on a fragile human memory. Each new generation of scribes and clergy became an unbreakable link in an eternal chain, connecting past and future through whispers, ink, and unyielding stone. At times, with the onset of night, the sleeping monastic abbeys seemed to come alive with the appearance of mysterious shadowy figures. Templar knights arrived under the cover of moonlight, exchanging silent gestures with monks who awaited them in the dim corridors. This exchange of information was extremely subtle and barely perceptible. A nod of the head, a carefully folded parchment, or a single glance was enough to convey instructions too confidential to be spoken aloud. The spear was never named, yet every gesture, every movement eloquently spoke volumes. Its invisible presence, whether literal or symbolic, permeated every corner of the stone halls, and it was thus, within these monasteries of silence, that history continued its noiseless and unseen movement. The roots of relics to the east, the meticulously coded manuscripts, and the enigmatic allegories in the margins of texts, all converged in this place, forming a single knot of mystery. While kingdoms waged fierce wars beyond the abbey walls, popes wove intricate intrigues, and armies marched long distances within the monasteries. History was carefully preserved, safely protected from the encroachments of conquerors, destructive ambitions, and human folly. At night, when the wind caressed the ancient monastery walls and the lamplights flickered dimly, the air seemed to vibrate with unspoken anticipation. The journey of the legendary spear paused for a moment, plunged into deep mystery, awaiting the next guardian, the next chapter of its narrative, the next whisper in the endless chain of its safeguarding. Beyond the familiar European roads and the impregnable fortified walls of Crusader cities lay a vast and perilous world. Boundless deserts stretched like golden seas. Majestic mountains rose like jagged peaks against the azure sky, and swift rivers carved hidden valleys where few dared to tread. It was along these routes, ancient paths trodden for centuries by merchants, devout pilgrims, and warring armies, that the Knights Templar dispatched their caravans at dawn. They carried with them something far more significant than ordinary supplies. Their cargo consisted of carefully guarded secrets, priceless relics, and scattered fragments of knowledge that possessed the potential to shift the balance of power in entire kingdoms, far beyond the Mediterranean. With the first rays of the morning sun, painting the sands in soft pink and golden hues. Mounted knights and inconspicuous pack animals began their journey, observing the strictest order. Each caravan was the result of meticulous planning. Experienced scouts advanced at the forefront. Special messengers ensured continuous communication between groups, and vigilant guards accompanied particularly valuable relics, which were transported in reinforced chests, wrapped in thick cloth and bound with iron. Among this precious cargo were not only manuscripts coded with the exact location of sacred objects and fragments of holy relics, but sometimes, as whispered in the most secret circles, parts of the legendary spear of destiny itself. This journey was fraught with incredible dangers. Bandits launched sudden attacks without any warning. Scorching desert winds could deplete water supplies, vital for people and animals, and harsh mountains demanded special skills and endurance that only a few possessed. However, for the Knights Templar, danger had long been a familiar companion, and the strictest secrecy served as their reliable shield. Each participant in the caravan clearly understood that they were transporting not just ordinary goods. They carried destiny itself. Every fragment, every map, every cautious step was like a precious thread in a grand tapestry woven from centuries of faith, boundless ambition, and ancient fear. Throughout the caravan's journey, monastic abbeys served as reliable refuges, bustling markets provided ideal cover, and numerous merchants formed an extensive network of discreet communication. The journey itself became a kind of living code, a complex dance of continuous movement and masterful concealment. To uninitiated observers, the caravans might have appeared as ordinary trading expeditions, transporting grain or precious silks. However, for those familiar with the secret signals, every flickering lamp, every barely visible mark on a tent, every precise arrival time of a messenger, all of this conveyed a hidden message that could drastically alter the course of the search for the legendary spear. In the silent oases of the desert, the knights found brief rest by cool wells, their steel armor reflecting the first rays of the rising sun. They knelt in humble prayer, their voices deep and hushed, harmonizing with the calming whisper of water flowing through stone channels. Sometimes ancient manuscripts were carefully unrolled, and excerpts from them were read aloud under the cover of moonlight. But these texts were so skillfully encrypted that only an elite circle of initiates could comprehend their sacred meaning. The relics themselves remained covered, untouched by foreign hands, silent, as if sensing the grandeur of their journey. Rumors of the legendary spear's travels spread in fragmented pieces. A merchant might casually remark to a fellow traveler that a sacred iron staff had passed through the region. A monk might hint that parts of the relic were hidden within the walls of a distant monastery. Each such message was masterfully woven to both guide and distract, forming a complex labyrinth of information designed to protect the truth while simultaneously feeding and spreading the myth. By the time the sun reached its zenith, the caravans often vanished into the mirages of boundless horizons, their silhouettes dissolving into the outlines of sand dunes or rocky cliffs. Observers from distant villages might catch a glimpse and perceive only the familiar scene: knights, pack animals, a trail of dust. They could not know that destiny itself followed their every step, that particles of the very weapon, said to have been forged in the shadow of Golgotha, were subtly advancing into lands far beyond the borders of the Christian world, into regions where other cultures, their own mystical beliefs, and ancient prophecies reigned. It was in these journeys, traversing through Persia, India, and as far as the remote corners of the East, that the tradition of the sacred spear became intertwined with distinctive local myths. In bustling markets and secluded monasteries, rumors mingled with centuries-old oral traditions of travelers, uniting the Christian relic with narratives of mighty kings, wise elders, and sacred weapons belonging to other cultures. The iron tip of the spear, invisible to the ordinary eye, yet invariably palpable, gradually acquired an aura of mystery that extended far beyond geographical boundaries, linguistic barriers, and religious dogmas. At night, when the sky was strewn with myriad stars, shining like a silver ocean above the sprawling tents, the Knights Templar kept their tireless vigil. Campfires flickered dimly, and shadows stretched long and strangely across the sand dunes. The sacred relics lay silently beneath numerous layers of fabric, under the watchful eyes of those who had sworn to protect them at the cost of their own lives and unshakable honor. The very silent grandeur of the desert seemed to sense the invisible weight of what passed through its expanses. The winds rustled in a language older than the most powerful empires, carrying echoes of forgotten prophecies through the night's silence. And so, as dawn rose over distant horizons, the caravans moved again, carrying with them not only supplies or maps, but also fragments of history, particles of faith, and perhaps the very spear that could shape kingdoms. Every mile traveled became an act of both preservation and careful concealment. It was a meticulously choreographed dance, where the past intertwined with the present, and the future remained shrouded in the mist of uncertainty, waiting for someone's hands, whether worthy or unwitting, to take possession of it. As the Knights Templar caravans delved deeper into the expanses of Persia and reached increasingly remote corners of Asia, they stepped into a world entirely embraced by its own centuries-old mysteries. This was a world where ancient sacred texts and revered relics held the weight of past centuries. Mountain ranges majestically rose to the sky, like colossal, silent guardians. Rivers carved their courses, etching deep valleys into the earth's crust, and cities, like precious gems, shone under the scorching desert sun. Here, the very air seemed saturated with the breath of history, and the spicy aromas of spices and incense mingled with the ubiquitous dust of ancient city streets. The Knights Templar, distinguished by their exceptional skill in preserving secrets and their subtlety of observation, pursued goals not only of protecting pilgrims, but also of deeply seeking knowledge. In secluded monasteries, hidden among rolling hills, and in ancient temples, consumed by jungles or buried by sands, they discovered scrolls and manuscripts whose writing was completely unfamiliar to Europeans, yet whose messages surprisingly resonated with their own faith. These texts spoke of divine instruments, epic sacred battles, and relics capable of drastically changing the destinies of entire nations. It was speculated that these ancient texts were not merely mythological tales, but held hidden truths, acting as keys capable of shedding light on the spear's winding path across continents. In rooms illuminated only by flickering light, the knights carefully unrolled scrolls of papyrus or thin silk, cautiously tracing unfamiliar symbols and hieroglyphs with their fingertips. Local monks and scholars from distant lands cautiously guided their investigations, well aware that these foreigners carried both genuine curiosity and a potential threat. The Templars, for their part, skillfully encoded fragments of their own knowledge, weaving Christian traditions about relics into local allegories, leaving encrypted messages accessible to interpretation only by the trained eye. In this delicate cultural exchange, the Christian cross met the Islamic crescent. The Western star intersected with the Eastern lotus, and the story of the spear gradually became an integral part of a vast tapestry of sacred artifacts and ancient prophecies. Some scrolls contained hints of weapons of unimaginable power, described in the language of metaphors and puzzles, often intertwining legendary tales with historical facts. One manuscript spoke of iron that drank the blood of heaven and rested beneath a sanctuary whose stones seemed to sing the memory of long-gone kings. Another mentioned a staff that pierces the mortal and touches the eternal, a phrase that made the hearts of the Knights Templar beat faster. Were these enigmatic lines direct references to the very spear they sought, or merely allegories born of rich local myth-making? There was no certainty, and this very uncertainty became their loyal ally, reliably guarding the true secret of the sacred relic. The Knights Templar also meticulously recorded their observations, compiling detailed maps of routes, marking mountain ranges and river flows, writing all their discoveries on parchment, which was then skillfully hidden inside false bookbindings. Some of these scrolls were left intentionally, encrypted with complex riddles designed to confuse potential pursuers and seekers, thereby ensuring that only members of the Order or the truly worthy could continue this centuries-long quest. In this complex interplay between discovery and concealment, the legend of the sacred spear acquired ever new layers, skillfully intertwining East and West into a single majestic narrative stretching across entire continents. In the night silence that enveloped the caravan camps, the campfire lights flickered and danced, casting strange, dancing shadows on precious scrolls and sacred reliquaries. The aroma of exotic incense, brought from distant lands, gently dissolved in the cool air, while the mysterious whispers of distant lands reached the knight's ears. Among them were those who dreamed of majestic temples, where mighty iron shafts would shine with dazzling brilliance under luxurious golden roofs. Others imagined themselves amidst grand battles predicted by ancient prophecies, where the sacred spear in absolute silence chose its worthy bearer. This journey, as everyone realized, was not just a physical overcoming of distances, but a deep spiritual odyssey. Every new mile traveled eastward only intensified the aura of mystery surrounding the priceless relic. In the bustling and noisy bazaars, where life teemed and a ceaseless din reigned, the Templars carefully studied artisans and merchants. Their gaze absorbed not only diverse goods, but also countless symbols and signs hidden everywhere. An intricate pattern on an ancient carpet, an elaborate motif carved on the doorframe of a dwelling, or even the strict sequence of prayers recited within temple walls. All of this could be interpreted by them as potential pointers, important points on their complex path. These signs could either bring them closer to the coveted relic, or perhaps distance them from it. The knights realized that the surrounding world itself could be read like an ancient manuscript, and that the history of the sacred spear was inextricably intertwined with the geography, culture, and collective memory of the countless peoples inhabiting these lands. By the time the Templar caravans reached the foothills of the Himalayas and the fringes of Central Asia, the legend of the sacred spear had grown into myths and tales, acquiring a truly mystical character. Some of the locals spoke of a celestial staff, faintly glowing in dreams, a weapon that was to appear to the world only when it was ready. Others told stories of mighty warriors from distant lands, holding iron capable of piercing the very fabric of destiny. For the Templars, this multi-voiced whisper served as both a warning and a source of deep encouragement. It was undeniable proof that the Relic's power resonated far beyond the borders of the Christian world, and that its great destiny was not limited to one kingdom or any single culture. Thus, amidst the majestic mountains, boundless deserts, and secluded hidden monasteries, the invisible, yet immensely powerful journey of the sacred spear steadily continued. Ancient scrolls recorded its unseen echoes. Allegories concealed its true essence under a veil of mystery, and the knights advanced with extreme caution, deeply understanding that each new discovery held both potential enlightenment and a hidden threat. In this complex interaction of East and West, faith and secrecy, history and legend, the Relic endured all trials. Its fate was inextricably intertwined with the silent hands of those who sought to preserve it, and with the multi-voiced whispers of the world that carried its story across boundless continents and through the depths of centuries. However, no profound secret could be entirely protected from all-consuming human ambition, and no relic, however sacred it might be, could escape the sinister shadow of betrayal. The valiant Templars, guardians of the spear of destiny itself, were burdened not only by the need to protect the sacred iron and scrolls interwoven with precious silk, but also by the weight of envy, greed, and cunning intrigues. These vices assailed them like an unseen predator lying in ambush. Throughout vast Europe and the lands of the East, whispers of the Relic spread faster than the knights themselves moved, carried by merchants, monks, and spies, passionately desiring to possess what was not rightfully theirs. Within the order itself, vigilance reached its absolute limit. Yet even the most disciplined and steadfast knights were not flawless. Some harbored an insatiable thirst for power, imagining themselves chosen by destiny to wield the sacred spear. Others succumbed to the temptations of bribery, alluring promises, or all-consuming fear, piecemeal conveying fragments of the sacred map to those lurking outside the commandery walls. In this complex web of intrigues, the fine lines between unwavering loyalty and base betrayal blurred, and even the very air seemed saturated with unspoken secrets, waiting for their moment to ignite and produce a destructive effect. Beyond the impregnable Templar fortresses, the Church and the monarchs of Europe watched the Order's activities with careful vigilance and deep suspicion. Rome, always apprehensive of unchecked power, received fragmented hints that the Order possessed relics of greater significance than those officially recognized. Kings, seeking their own advantage, tried to curry favor with the knights, offering vast landholdings or high titles in exchange for sacred knowledge. Some even attempted to infiltrate caravans, posing as humble pilgrims or simple merchants, hoping for at least a glimpse of the sacred iron shaft, rumored to turn the tide of any military campaign. The most insidious betrayals were characterized by their subtlety, remaining unseen until their destructive consequences became apparent. A carelessly misplaced scroll here, a mark overlooked there, and routes meant to remain in the strictest secrecy could be revealed. Entire military campaigns could be drastically rerouted, and the lives of warriors lost or saved based on information stolen in deep shadow. In some cases, local rulers in the East attempted to manipulate Templar movements, offering deceptive clues or concealing true treasures beneath layers of ancient myths. The journey of the sacred spear, therefore, became not only a harsh test of physical endurance, but also a test of keen discernment, of the ability to recognize whom to trust, and when even a simple suspicion should guide action. Within the walls of monasteries and austere commanderies, the knights held quiet conversations, discussing omens, visions, and unsettling rumors with extreme caution. True names were uttered only in exceptional cases, and any references were skillfully veiled in complex codes or vague metaphors. The oldest and wisest knights carried the heavy burden of secrecy on their shoulders, well aware that a single misstep could undo centuries of careful guardianship. Every night, as the lamps burned low and shadows lengthened, filling the space, the same agonizing question invariably haunted them. Could the sacred spear survive the onslaught of human ambition? At times, even loyal allies could become unwitting betrayers, without malicious intent, but driven by deep despair or all-consuming fear. Thus, a monk might inadvertently reveal a coded passage, sincerely believing it vital for the Church's higher guidance. A young knight might lose an important scroll, completely unaware that it contained detailed instructions to a hidden vault. Thus, the vigilance of each guardian became a sacred ritual, daily checking of all locks, meticulous verification of every incoming message, and an unceasing reaffirmation of their sacred oath. Nevertheless, treachery was not always expressed through a direct act of violence or simple theft. Often, it disguised itself as misinformation, misleading the Knights Templar about the true location of the sacred spear when, in fact, it was stored in a completely different part of the world. Large-scale operations could be meticulously planned based on false information, and long and arduous journeys were incredibly prolonged due to skillful deception. It was in such moments that the sacred presence of the relic was felt particularly acutely, perceived not merely as an object of metal or wood, but as an invisible, omnipotent force capable of shaping destinies and demanding exceptional vigilance, extraordinary patience, and unwavering resolve from its guardians. Thus, the chronicle of betrayals became closely intertwined with the heroic traditions of the Templars. Later, historians and chroniclers recorded in their annals information about mysterious disappearances, sudden and inexplicable deaths, as well as inexplicable movements. Some observers noted periodic instances of disfavor and downfall within the order itself, hypothesizing that even the strictest secrecy could not fully curb deep human passions and ambitions. And yet, despite all intrigues and trials, the sacred spear invariably remained under reliable guard, serving as an unbreakable symbol of the discipline and unwavering resolve of those who had sworn to protect it above their own lives. As dusk fell, in rooms fragrant with aromas and illuminated by the soft flicker of candles, the knights reverently knelt, engaged in a solemn vigil. Beyond the abbey walls, the world seethed with unrestrained ambition and intricate intrigues, but within, a deep, almost palpable silence reigned. And in this silence, the spear of destiny rested unshakably, a dormant but powerful force that seemed to be aware of all manifestations of treachery, yet remained completely unaffected by them, patiently awaiting the appearance of a hand truly worthy of once again directing its great destiny. Legends speak not only of the sacred relics themselves, but also of the brave people who transported them across the boundless seas, carrying in their wooden and iron ships the very thread of destiny. Thus, in the mid-13th century, An impressive fleet of ships sailed from the harbors of Acre, loaded to capacity with untold treasures collected over many decades of crusades, tons of gold, priceless ancient manuscripts, and, as whispered, even fragments of the spear of destiny itself. The knights entrusted with guarding such precious cargo fully understood the grand significance of their sacred duty. For any failure in this endeavor threatened not merely the loss of immense wealth, but could fatally alter the course of history for entire kingdoms. The fleet silently plunged into the Mediterranean waters, shrouded in a dense veil of the strictest secrecy. Its sails stood out as dark silhouettes against the gathering twilight sky. Skilled and experienced navigators charted a course through these treacherous waters, constantly fearing pirates and hostile fleets who coveted the precious relics no less than ordinary gold coins. However, the sea itself was a very capricious and unpredictable guardian. Storms could erupt suddenly, without the slightest warning. Powerful waves crashed against the sides of the ships, like the angry fists of ancient gods, and maritime navigation itself turned into a deadly gamble, as compass needles trembled erratically, and stars, faithful guides, hid behind thick clouds. Night after night, the ships steadily continued their journey. The lanterns on the masts burned dimly, and voices on the decks almost completely hushed. Knights tirelessly patrolled the decks, their keen eyes carefully scrutinizing every corner, searching for any potential threat to their priceless cargo. The relics themselves, carefully wrapped in thick fabrics and securely fastened in reinforced chests, seemed to almost vibrate with a mystical anticipation, as if realizing that their current journey could be a fateful turning point, whose significance extended far beyond the understanding of ordinary mortals. And then, as the fleet approached a narrow strait, disaster suddenly struck. Unexpected and furious storms descended upon the ships with merciless ferocity. Mighty masts cracked and split. Sails were torn to shreds by the onslaught of the wind, and raging waves relentlessly engulfed one vessel after another. In the ensuing chaos, the knights bravely battled the elements, but even their valor and strictest discipline could not overcome nature's primal wrath. Some ships sank without a trace, dragging their priceless cargo to the bottomless depths of the ocean. Others disappeared, carried away by powerful currents into the unknown, their further fate shrouded in darkness. Those who were fortunate enough to survive this monstrous catastrophe spoke of the horror they experienced only in hushed, almost inaudible voices. People desperately clung to floating wreckage. Priceless relics slipped from weakening hands, and distant lanterns swayed on the waves, like fading stars, before finally being swallowed by the abyss of utter darkness. Many of the survivors swore that in the very epicenter of the storm, they caught a fleeting glimpse of the spear itself, which, they claimed, dimly shimmered underwater, as if resisting the relentless pull of the deep sea. Whether this was a genuine miracle or merely a deceptive hallucination born of fear and despair, no one could say for sure. But this chilling memory continued to haunt their nightmares for decades. The disappearance of the fleet became not only a cautionary tale, but also a source of intense obsession. Chroniclers, some of whom claimed to have personally witnessed the aftermath of that tragedy, carefully recorded fragmented testimonies. Distant shipwrecks washed ashore, empty chests found in secluded coves, and relics that surfaced years later under circumstances that were utterly impossible to verify. Each such narrative only plunged the spear deeper into mystery, imbuing it with a mystical presence that transcended its usual physical form, as if it were capable of disappearing at will, remaining hidden until the world was ready to receive it, or until destiny itself called it forth again. As time passed, the legend of the sunken fleet grew and spread throughout the world. Rumors of its mysterious disappearance stirred the imagination of monarchs, desperate adventurers, and countless treasure seekers. Numerous maps were created, often containing deliberate inaccuracies, designed to indicate places where ships might have sunk or where relics might have been securely hidden. Some brave souls claimed to have found fragments, pieces of old iron or splintered wood. However, none of these findings could ever be reliably confirmed as the authentic spear of destiny. Its phenomenal elusiveness itself, over time, became an integral part of its mystical power, serving as a constant reminder that destiny is not merely a gift from above, but rather something that must be earned, and sometimes it remains hidden by forces beyond human comprehension. Within the walls of Templar monasteries and commanderies, any discussions about the vanished fleet were rare, and always conducted with extreme caution. For any information that might be publicly disclosed immediately risked attracting the greedy gaze and grasping hands of those who uncontrollably yearned for power. The surviving knights and skilled scribes recorded this story only in encrypted form, thereby ensuring that knowledge of the fleet and of any sacred relics it carried would remain not merely a historical fact, but a true test of faith. Each narrative, each recorded line, was like a multi-layered palimpsest, where truth was skillfully mixed with carefully dosed misinformation, serving as a reliable protection against both human ambition and idle curiosity. Even today, the legends of the long-vanished fleet continue to live in popular memory, serving as a silent testament to the extraordinarily dangerous path of sacred relics. The legendary iron, which, according to tradition, pierced Christ's side, was secretly transported across the boundless seas, plunged into the depths under the onslaught of fierce storms, remaining inaccessible to greedy eyes, yet tantalizingly real. This became undeniable proof that some forces, whether divine or earthly, cannot be fully tamed. They can only be revered and respected. And in those rare, quiet moments when the sea surface calms and the moonlight gently plays on the waves, it is easy to imagine this relic resting somewhere below, patiently waiting, resilient, and perhaps even aware of the approaching hand destined to lift it. By the early 14th century, the Knights Templar had transformed from mere guardians into a powerful force, regarded by even monarchs and pontiffs with hidden envy and deep suspicion. Their wealth had grown to colossal proportions, and their extensive network of influence spanned continents. The Templars' knowledge of relics, both genuine and mythical, was truly unprecedented. However, as is well known, great power is always accompanied by equally great danger, and the order that had guarded the spear of destiny for centuries now faced enemies both within and outside the Christian world. These individuals, driven by fear, believed that no relic, however sacred, should remain outside their complete control. Pope Clement V, yielding to powerful pressure from King Philip IV of France, launched a massive campaign against the Templars that threatened to undermine the very foundations of the order. Accusations of heresy, blasphemy, and corruption were leveled, often based on extremely scant evidence, but sufficient to sow public fear and indignation. The knights, whose oath bound them to protect holy sites, now found themselves accused of betrayal. Their sacred vows were cynically perverted and used as a pretext for their persecution. In the dimness of fortified castle halls, the tension was almost palpable. Those who had guarded secrets for centuries realized that the order itself, and perhaps the spear itself, were under threat. Arrests followed swiftly and were widespread. Commanderies were plundered, valuable manuscripts seized, and knights thrown into dungeons where interrogations ranged from sophisticated psychological pressure to the most brutal torture. Some confessed under duress, naming allies and revealing fragments of secret knowledge, while others remained silent, loyal to their vows even at the brink of death. Throughout this chaos, the spear itself vanished from sight. None of the chroniclers of that time could reliably confirm its subsequent fate. Perhaps it was securely hidden in one of the labyrinthine secret vaults, or carried away by loyal knights, or secretly transported to lands inaccessible to the influence of the Church and the Crown. The fall of the Templars was a meticulously orchestrated symphony of political maneuvers. King Philip IV sought to seize their immense wealth, and the papacy aimed to assert its dominance. In this chaos, rumors of the spear's survival spread everywhere. Whispers told of knights who fled east, carrying fragments of the relic with them, while others, it was said, hid manuscripts detailing its location in remote European monasteries. The boundary between history and legend blurred inexorably, and the presence of the spear transformed into an invisible thread woven into every rumor of Templar survival. Monasteries and monastic abbeys became temporary refuges. Some knights dissolved into obscurity, joining other orders or adopting new identities, but always carrying in their memory or possession the relic they had sworn to protect. Others secretly sailed to distant lands, crossing seas and deserts, as their predecessors had done for decades, ensuring that the spear of destiny would under no circumstances fall into unworthy hands. Every act of concealment only strengthened the legend. The relic was too powerful to be widely known, too dangerous to be revealed, yet too strong to be forgotten. The Church and monarchy celebrated the suppression of the Templars, unaware that the true influence of the order continued to persist in hidden corners of the world. Crypts beneath abandoned commanderies, coded manuscripts in European libraries, and remote monasteries in the East served as silent witnesses. In each of them, the legacy of guardianship was preserved, proof that faith and secrecy could withstand even the most aggressive attempts at eradication. Even public stories of betrayal and executions contained subtle hints of the spear's survival. Chroniclers spoke of visions, miraculous escapes, and relics mysteriously appearing in remote regions. Whether truth or legend, these tales ensured that the idea of the spear remained alive in people's imagination, becoming an enduring force, shaping histories, ambitions, and dreams long after the knights themselves had vanished. At night, in silent halls where candles flickered and stone absorbed the weight of history, the legacy of the Templars lived on. Secrets were whispered through walls, manuscripts concealed knowledge, and the spear, whether material iron, myth, or both, remained out of reach. Its journey continued, protected not by armies, but by unbreakable vows, hidden paths, and a faith that transcended all persecution. Thus, the fall of the Templars did not mark the end of the spear, but became the beginning of a new chapter in its history. Its guardians transformed into shadows of history. Its presence became a legend that spread across Europe, the East, and beyond, awaiting the very hand capable of unraveling centuries-old mysteries and fulfilling its silent, enduring promise. After the series of trials against the Templar order, it seemed that the world had decisively turned one of the most dramatic pages in its history. In the public eye, this powerful brotherhood was officially disbanded, its immense wealth ruthlessly confiscated, and its valiant knights either languished in dungeons or met their tragic demise. However, as is often the case, silent shadows hold completely different traditions than those recorded on the pages of official chronicles. It was in these dense, impenetrable shadows, far from prying eyes, that the spear of destiny continued its invisible existence, enduring the storm of persecution. Various versions of its subsequent fate hung in the air like a faint whisper. Some claimed that the sacred spear was secretly transported to carefully camouflaged vaults located beneath ancient European monasteries, where it could rest in safety. Others, on the contrary, quietly conversed that loyal knights managed to carry it far to the east, hiding it in lands inaccessible to any king, pope, or greedy conqueror. The preservation of these profound secrets required truly surgical precision and meticulousness. Ancient manuscripts were repeatedly recopied. Important notes were subjected to complex re-encoding, and enigmatic symbols were etched on the walls and floors of secret refuges, readable only by those specially trained to decipher them. Every such change was a strictly deliberate act, serving a dual purpose: to protect the relic and to spread disinformation. For even the slightest oversight could irrevocably reveal the spear's location to those whose ambitions were fueled solely by insatiable greed and by no means by true reverence. Thus, the complex mission of guarding this priceless relic transformed into an extremely delicate and subtle balance between complete concealment and careful preservation. In seemingly serene European cities, where life went on as usual, travelers passed on incredible stories of cloaked figures silently gliding under the cover of moonlight, as well as mysterious cargo invisibly moving from one ancient monastery to another. Some brave souls even claimed to have glimpsed the relic itself, skillfully hidden in plain sight, an iron shaft expertly disguised among ordinary ceremonial tools, or fragments of an ancient map subtly sewn into the binding of an old psalter. To the uninitiated observer, these objects seemed completely mundane, unremarkable elements of everyday life. However, for those initiated into the great secret, they represented crucial parts of a complex puzzle, whose elements were scattered across continents and spanned many centuries. Even within the church itself, where, it seemed, everything was permeated with the light of truth, knowledge of the spear was strictly and carefully divided. High-ranking cardinals, humble monks, and diligent scribes possessed only the morsel of information that was absolutely necessary to maintain the general illusion of complete ignorance. Each of them was bound by an unbreakable oath of non-disclosure, whose roots went back centuries, making it older than many existing kingdoms. The very process of concealment transformed into a sacred ritual, with procedures as sacred and unshakable as prayer itself. The keys to the puzzle were entrusted only to those deemed truly worthy. Secret codes were passed exclusively by word of mouth, and the significance of each object, each detail was reinforced not by brute force, but by selfless devotion to the preservation of the great secret. Former associates and secret allies of the Templars, scattered across the vast expanses of Europe and Asia, became silent but vigilant guardians of this great mystery. For example, a humble monk in majestic Constantinople might carefully guard an ancient manuscript containing only a subtle hint of a hidden vault located somewhere in France. And a retired knight, living a secluded life on the sunny island of Sicily, might possess only a small fragment of the relic itself, unaware of its complete and true history. These men and women, living in different parts of the world, carried out their duties with astonishing, almost palpable quiet intensity, deeply aware that every object, every ancient scroll, every skillfully coded note was merely part of a much grander and older legacy. In parallel with the increasing secrecy, the most incredible legends grew and multiplied around the spear of destiny. Villagers gathered around hearths, whispered about a piece of iron that faintly glowed in the moonlight, or about mysterious figures appearing to people in dreams, holding staves of unimaginable power. These astonishing stories freely crossed national borders, organically merging with ancient oral traditions of distant lands. In some remote regions, local sages skillfully wove fragments of Templar knowledge into their own mystical systems, thereby creating a complex tapestry where Christian relics were surprisingly intertwined with Eastern prophecies. The spear itself gradually transformed from a simple physical object into something much greater, a powerful symbol, the quintessence of destiny, whose essence transcended ordinary iron and wood. Its invisible yet profound presence was felt in every careful movement of the guardians, in their quiet, whispered prayers, and in the meticulous, careful preservation of ancient knowledge. Both knights and monks, united by this great mission, equally acknowledged that they were guarding not just an ancient weapon, but an entire epoch of history, an unimaginable power, and a colossal responsibility whose roots reached back centuries to the very moment of Golgotha. Night after night, in hidden chambers and silent corridors, as if frozen in eternity, the guardians with unwavering vigilance checked their precious charges. The flickering candlelight playfully glided over the uneven stone walls, highlighting mysterious marks, barely discernible keys, and carefully bound scrolls holding ancient secrets. Every movement was extremely deliberate. Every decision weighed with a deep understanding that even centuries of carefully guarded secrecy could be instantly shattered by a single act of carelessness or cunning betrayal. And so, for centuries following the dramatic fall of the Templar Order, the Spear of Destiny continued its existence, not as a dusty trophy, but as a living, pulsating mystery. Its incredible power was preserved not in plain sight, but hidden in deep shadows, sustained by unwavering devotion, strict discipline, and an unbroken chain of guardians who clearly understood that the world was not yet ready to bear the burden of its possession. In the complete silence of the night, when only a light wind touched the ancient stone walls and the whole world seemed to sink into a deep sleep, this powerful relic remained, patient, eternal, silently awaiting that single moment when history and destiny would finally converge. As the Spear of Destiny continued its invisible, unseen journey through the centuries, a faint whisper of its mysterious existence began to spread across lands far beyond the European continent. In the boundless expanses of the East, amidst majestic, sprawling cities secluded mountain monasteries, and impregnable desert fortresses. Legends of a sacred iron staff gradually arose and strengthened. These traditions often intricately intertwined with ancient local prophecies and mystical teachings. Scholars and mysterious mystics spoke of a weapon that possessed the ability to pierce not only mortal flesh, but also the very delicate fabric of destiny. Of a relic whose powerful force transcended cultural and religious beliefs.